Let's continue our measurement discussions with more examples and detailed calculations. Let's say that we had a section of your house, and I told you, stick with one or the other. You could say that it was 25 feet 10 inches, or you could say, feet, point, whatever, engineered scale. Pick one or the other. And so let's just do the standard scale first. So let's say this is a 25 foot 10 inch piece of your house, and then this is 17 feet 5 inches. Well, folks, if you were to do this math, we can't multiply things that are apples to oranges. So feet and inches are different units. And so the way that you would have to do this is you'd have to get this all on the same scale. If you did engineer scale, it's all the same because, 25.6 feet, then you could just do the feet multiplied out. If you do the standard scale, the only way that you can really do this is convert everything into inches. Well, folks, look how crazy this looks, okay? If you wanted to do that, you would take your 25 feet and multiply it by the 12 inches in each foot, plus your 10 inches. And so this is 310 inches up here. And then this other side would be 17 feet times your 12 inches in a foot for 204 plus 5 or 209 inches. And so now that you had apples to apples, you could take it and you could do length times width, 204 inches times 310 inches, which gives you 63,240 inches. Now, folks, here's the thing that throws people off. If we wanted this in square feet, I'm going to write this number down so you can think about this. This is square inches. 63,240 square inches. 1 square foot is the same as saying 12 inches by 12 inches. So 1 square foot is 144 square inches. Does that make sense? Because there's 12 inches in a foot, 12 inches in a foot. So 1 square foot is equivalent to 144 inches. In order to convert this back to square feet, you would have to take the square inches and divide it by 144. And so 63,240 divided by 144. Or in other words, this is 439.17 square feet. Now, I did the math. It works. Sure. Let me show you how to make your life so much easier. Okay? I'm going to leave my drawing up here, but I'm going to switch. Go ahead, Sam. What you got?
So and I hate to be this person, but you did 310 by 204 and not 209.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's going to mess up where you're going.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. Let's fix it. So, because it was 204 in the calculator, and I think I just left it there. I didn't add it in. Thank you. So, 310 times 209 for the inches. And so, it's actually 64,790 square inches. And then divide that by your 144 now. And so it is 449.93 square feet. And I appreciate you doing that because I am going to compare it to what I'm doing next. And I would have been sitting there scratching my head as to why my math was off. So I'm glad you pointed that out. So now let's show you how to do it an easier way. Yes, this all maths out as long as you keep track of everything. But if you go to Google, folks, and you type in, what is it? 25 feet, 10 inches. So 25 feet, 10 inches. And then just hit times. And then 17 feet, 5 inches. And you hit enter. Google will do the math for you. Now, here's the crazy thing. For whatever reason, it likes to default to meters squared. Hang on. Okay. So here's your answer, meters squared. Folks, this is all you have to do. highlight it, right click it, copy it. Now open a new tab and do meters squared to square foot. And there is a conversion calculator right in here. So go in here to this one, paste your number, look what you got. Exactly what I just did, 449.93 square feet. Folks, isn't that so much prettier and easier than having to convert it all to inches and then dividing it back into square feet? Now, the math is the math, but no matter which way you do it, if you do engineered scale, if you do square footage scale, folks, make your lives easier. Work smarter, not harder. As opposed to having to actually manually do the math, and I'm glad, Sam, as I said, you corrected me because it wouldn't have added up. But you see, it's perfect, right? We did the math exactly. And so no matter which one you pick, engineered scale or standard scale, stick with it, and Google can do the math. And then you can convert it back to square feet, and then that way, on your actual worksheet, you break it into the components, and you tell me how many square feet are in each section. Now, let me formally introduce the homework really quick. As I said, your task is to measure your house, okay? And so let me give you this example, and then I'll go over anything. I'm going to leave time to explain everything again. We got plenty of time. So let's say that you go out. My recommendation is use some graph paper. And it doesn't have to be your house. It can be your friend's house, your mom's house, your dad's. I don't care whose house it is, okay? And all you need to do is go out and you measure it. And I would print out some graph paper. And I would, end up with a floor plan or whatever it looks like for your individual house. So you're going to draw it out. You're going to give me the measurements, 35 feet, 10 inches, 25 feet, 2 inches, 17 feet, 32 feet. And then you're going to break it into components. And so you can do it where show me your work, right? I need to know, how did you break it up? How many rectangles did you have? How many squares did you have? And then once you do it, you're going to calculate the size in each portion and then put the math together on the side. Here's A, here's B, here's C, and then give me a total square footage number. That's what I need. I do not need to know where your bedrooms are, where your bathrooms are, the size of your rooms, or anything like that. So all you've got to do is get the exterior measurements if possible, and then extrapolate it out to different floors, break it into components, find the measurements of the different pieces, and then add it up. So let's just make sure you're comfortable again. And so tell me, just real quick, throw it in chat, real quick, which part you want me to go over again. We've got time. So I just got a message. Yeah, go ahead.
So for me, this bonus room I'm in has those vaulted ceilings where they don't, surely 5 feet. Like I'm about 5 feet and my head would hit a lot of the ceilings. So I'd be curious to go over an example, kind of something that goes over a bonus room like that.
Yeah, and so let me go back to the slides real quick because I did kind of skip over that. And so if you go back and look how we kind of consider these sloped ceilings, we've got a room like this where the ceilings slope down. And so as long as at least half the room is 7 feet from ground to ceiling, you can count the room. And then when you get into the more nuanced details, I can see the slopes, even though it's blurred kind of behind you. What you would do is you take a tape measure and you would grab it from the ground up to the slopes. And let's say that the slopes right here where they end is only 4 feet. Well, you can't count all the way down there. So you would have to walk away from the wall and measure to where it is at least 5 feet from floor to the slopes. And so if this was 3 feet away from the wall, you would have to remove the 3 feet on that wall the whole way down. So if it was, 3 feet and 15 feet deep, 15 times 3, subtract that out from the square footage of the total room. You can't include it as living area. So that's how you would have to do it. You have to basically measure away from the wall. And so what it will ultimately look like in this visual here You got 14 feet across by however deep the room is. Well, if it's 14 feet from here to here, you would have to remove this space and this space. You can't include that. So let's say that you lose, a foot and a foot. This would only be 12 feet by however deep the room is at that point. And if your room's not at least halfway 7 feet, you can include it in the living area. But you could still put it on your layout, your floor plan, your whatever. And here's the other thing, folks. I got to explain something. I'm not going to show up at any of your houses and verify these measurements. I'm not. I can't. I won't. Okay? And so I also told you that you can measure anybody's houses. The point is to give it a good old college try, as they say, to get experience with measuring, to kind of start working on breaking down the components and trying to learn the way that this works. I'm not expecting any of you to be an expert on any of this, but start getting used to it. What you got, Caroline?
So what about if you're measuring the house from the outside, but then like we have a third floor, I can measure that from the inside and then just add the 6 inches?
Yeah. So let's clarify that. If you're dealing with the third floor, obviously it's not practical to get on a ladder and measure the third floor, especially if it's not the same size as the rest of the house. So let's say that you had just a room. Well, let's use this room as an example. Let's say that this is a very elongated room, and if you were picturing it from an aerial view, it's like this. And so your slopes are here. And so if you're inside the house, you would measure from wall to wall. But because there's probably some dead attic space over here, you don't need to add 6 inches because it doesn't go outside. And so you're only allowed to go up to the 5 foot anyway. So no adding 6 inches there. But when you measure here, because these are exterior walls and there's no dead space, you would go from here to here and add 6 inches on this side, add 6 inches on that side to account for the exterior space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So when we're dealing with, and I want to find a good starting point to be sure. So you want to talk about some more examples of like how to do the measurements? Yeah, no problem. So let's just do one now that we've kind of gotten a grasp on some of the different pieces here. If you go back to the residential square footage guidelines, let's just pick one. And I'll start working with you on this. Where is it at? There we go. So let's do... Let's do this house right here, okay? And of course, this is an easy one, but let's just take it nice and slow. If this was your house, and this is a true 2-story house, but this does have this bonus living heated room over here, we're going to do it in a couple components, all right? So let's just start with the main part of the house. You're going to come out here, and you're going to pick the most practical place to start measuring. Now, this one looks like it's got a little bit of depth differentiation here, and it's hard to tell in the picture because of some decorative pieces. So if I was doing this house, I would come out here to this front corner, and I would start my measurements. And so I would take my tape measure, and I would measure from here across the front. And on my graph paper, I'm going to start drawing. Let me kind of zoom out so you can see it at the same time. This first line of the first floor. I'm going to zoom out just a touch. Well, actually, I'll just do it off to the side here so you can see it. So I'm going to measure this line from here to here. On my graph paper, I'm going to make a line. And let's say that it's 40 feet. I'm going to make up some measurements because I can't see, but then we'll actually do the math of the measurements down there. And then I'm going to measure from this corner to this back corner. And let's say that that's 30 feet. And then I'm going to take from behind, you can't see it, but the back wall I'm going to do the exact same way. I'm going to go from here to here. And hopefully it's the same because this looks like a very big square. So let's call it 40 feet again. But sometimes there's some out juttings. And then, of course, this one kind of has like a taper in and then this little bonus room. So we're going to measure that bonus room as well. And so it looks like, it's, I don't know, we'll just say 15 feet. We'll say 10 feet. Say 15 feet. And so now that I've got this, you're going to start breaking it down, okay? This is a 2-story house. Everybody still with me so far? Okay. So first and foremost, I need to figure out what I'm going to do because it's 2 stories. Well, this out-jutting doesn't have 2 stories. It just has the one, okay? Bonus room either on it looks like the second floor. And the first floor, maybe it's a garage, maybe it's something else. So the first floor that is going to be duplicated, this one's easy, right? 40 feet by 30 feet. Now I am going to go down to the actual numbers so you can see it and practice it. So let me remove my drawing and let's go down to the actual numbers. So if we've got our first floor, it is 40 by 30. I guessed that correctly. Although this one got a little weird because of this overlap, like I said. And so what they did is they basically kind of tried to account for that. And so the easiest thing to understand, even though this weird outjutting exists, because it's plumb and square, it's 40 feet back here, which means it's also hidden, but it's 40 feet up here. So we're going to calculate the first floor, the part that's going to be duplicated. So I'm going to take my 40 foot by 30 foot rectangle. And so I'm going to say that this first floor is 1,200 square feet. This just one section. I'm not including the garage. I'm not including the second floor, but it's still good. Perfect. And so because this is a true 2-story, there is the same amount of living space on the first floor and the same amount of living space on the second floor. All I have to do is take this and multiply it by 2. And that's now going to give me the square footage for both the first and second. Now let me zoom up here. So that means this is 1,200. This is also 1,200 because there's no differentiation on the first floor or the second floor. And I told you in a true 2-story, stairs count on both floors. I don't need to do anything with the stairs. But there is this living area in this room. Now, this out-jutting, the garage, total is obviously 25 feet by 32 feet. Well, that's great to know for the garage sake, but that's not living space. So this is where we said it may be more practical to measure from that heated room. So in Caroline's example and in Samantha's example, I would probably go into this bonus room and I would measure from this back side out to this side. And I'm going to add 6 inches. Why? Because this is an exterior wall. And notice that's what they did here. 23.5 feet. Or in other words, 23 feet, 6 inches. They added 6 inches for this exterior wall. Is everybody okay with that statement? Because normally we measure from the outside. And so that would include your vinyl siding, your brick siding, your masonite, whatever you have. And so they measured from here to here, which was 23 plus 6 inches. And that's where they got this 23.5 feet for this linear side. And so because this has the knee walls, the slope ceilings, notice we're not going all the way to the outside because there's dead space and we can't include that dead space. So what they did is they just measured to where the slopes were at least 5 feet from floor to slope. And they came up with 15 feet. And so for this particular room, to figure out the square footage, you're going to take your 23.5 feet. And because that's the engineer scale, we can just leave it as 23.5. That's all footage. There's no inches in there. Because what that's really saying is 23 feet, 6 inches. And then you multiply it by your 15 feet. And so this bonus room has 352.5 square feet. And now for this house, your answer, if I say, give me the total square footage, on your graph paper, you'd have exactly this. Your first floor, showing your calculations of 1,200, and the garage you're not counting. Your second floor, which is your B square, and then your C rectangle. And so you would add them all together. 1,200 square feet of living space on the first floor, 1,200 square feet of living space on the second floor, and 352.5 for the bonus room. The total square footage for this house, 2,752.5 square feet. And of course you can round it because we don't really do 0.5 of a square foot. So you could call it 53 or 52. The commission's not coming after you either way. And so for your homework, you would turn this in exactly with a diagram that looked like this. A is 1200. Here's A. B is 1200. Here's B. C is 352. Add them all up, and that's all I need from you. Tell me your square footage of your house. And what I was showing you earlier, when you measure your house, folks, these examples are very nice to you. This one, it has 0.5. But what I was trying to show you, and I'll show you one more time because I want to make sure you are all comfortable. We are way ahead of the game in this class. And so we've got plenty of time to still talk about this today before we move on. And I want to make sure you're comfortable in every way, shape, and form. But what I was showing you in Google is, let's say that in this example, it was a little more mean. And this was, instead of 40 feet, maybe 40 feet, 7 inches. And instead of 30 feet, this was 32 feet, 8 inches. Well, you're not going to knock off 8 inches. That's almost a foot. You're not going to knock off 7 inches. That's almost a foot. And so you can use Google to make your life easier when you get these very abstract numbers. And that's where I said, okay, well, if you come into Google and you say 40 feet, 7 inches, and I'll clear this for a second or put it in here. 40 feet, 7 inches times 32 feet. What did I do? 8 inches. Google is smart enough to do that math for you. But I told you, it gives it to you for whatever reason in meters squared, which is not pretty. But all you have to do is copy it, right? Highlight it, copy it, and then open up a new tab where you've got meters squared to square footage conversions. Google's smart enough to do that too. And so then you can come in and you can paste that meter squared you just got. And so let's say those were our measurements. Well, now I know that the first floor is 1,325 square feet. And it's okay to use these systems to make your life easier. Because when we're dealing with things like 10 feet, 7 feet, or 7 inches, 8 inches, it's a lot harder to do the math. You're either converting it all to inches using the engineer scale that you may not be as comfortable with, or you can use Google that's smarter than the rest of us. And so in that example, if you go back to your residential square footage guidelines, if that just happened to be the measurements, you would just write that in there, 1,325. And so I'm okay with not seeing your mathematical work because I know that you may have used something like Google, and I'm fine with that. I'm never going to force you folks to do anything that's going to be crazy, ungodly, unruly. I am here to teach you the tricks to make your lives so much easier. And I will tell you, it is going to be frustrating for you when you go out there and you start measuring, aside from the fact that you're taking this class in the middle of summer. Gross. I recommend doing this early in the morning or late in the afternoon, okay? Don't go out there at 12 o'clock. Here's the thing. I want you to picture this, folks. I'm a big old man. I've been out there in a full monkey suit, as they say, in the heat of the day, measuring houses, just sweating to death, holding this paper, getting in briars, bleeding on the paper, sweating on the paper. And so here's what I'll ask, too. If you're out there and you're drawing this up and you sweat on it, you get dirt on it, you smudge on it, once you get your measurements outside, redo them on a prettier sheet of paper, and then that's what you're going to scan in and send to me so it's actually legible. Because here's what I want you to think about. I want it to look like, and it doesn't have to be perfect. This is your introductory level exposure to this. But I want it to be something where if the commission ever looked at you and said, show me how you got this square footage, they can look at it and they can see your train of thought. Here's where they measured the first floor. Here's where they duplicated it on the second floor. Here's where they broke it into a triangle. Here's where they broke it into a rectangle. And then, of course, here's how they kind of pieced the pieces together and got their total final square footage. And as I said, we got time. What else do you want to talk about? Anything and everything, folks. Don't ever be afraid to ask questions. And I know that sometimes this moves too fast, and I apologize. I'm here to make it as clear as possible. Talk to me. What else do we want to go over? I'm here.
I feel like another example with like the weird shaped homes, because mine is shaped.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of them that are shaped weird. And that's the cool thing about this book. So as we keep going, it's going to keep giving us different examples. And so This one's a split level, and so I hate split levels. If any of you have split levels, they're horrible because you walk in on one floor and a true split level goes up and goes down. And so, of course, you have to count the kind of split on one floor versus the other because otherwise it's not 7 feet. So here's like an example with a lower level, an upper level. Let me see if I can find one that's a little more crazy. Okay, here you go. So this one is a good example of some craziness. So there is types of homes where the second floor has the outjutting. These are very popular in North Carolina. And so I'll give you some recommendations here. You're going to measure the first floor just like you would any other time. And so in this one, we've got an L shape. And so, of course, we can break this L shape very easily into these two rectangles. But you can see what they've done is they created this overlay. And the way that you do that is while you're outside, you look for lineups. Okay, well, maybe this second floor outjutting, let me go back up to the picture, lines up with this section of the house. And so you're going to know that that second floor has the same width. So you can measure here, but maybe it doesn't because it outjuts on both sides. So what you would do is you would just get to the point where you can measure underneath that outjutting. So if you were outside and you could see it, you would just take your tape measure, stick it up to the side of the house, just measure how far out it goes. In this case, it's 2 feet. And maybe it does that on the front too. So same thing, you measure from here to here is 2 feet. What you can then do is take your first floor, and this is where sometimes you just got to look at it, folks. I've been a crazy weirdo before. I'm just standing out there looking at a house, and I'm just trying to find where lines line up and where things kind of flow and what I can measure to help me figure this stuff out. And what that allows you to do is when you got your first floor, you can actually do kind of like an overlay and say, okay, well, from the first floor, this comes out 2 feet, and then it comes out 2 feet over here, and it comes out 2 feet in the back. And so you can use that to say, okay, well, if this is 25, I got 2 feet extra back here. I got 2 feet extra up here. That's 26, 27, 28, 29 feet on that side. And then if this is 18, but I got 2 feet of outjutting here, it's 29 by 20. And so that's where for the second floor, you're going to add that extra area in, but you got to keep it separate. So in this particular instance, let's just do the first floor math, and then we'll do the second floor math because we figured it out based on it because we added in this overhang. So the first floor, I'm going to divide this into this rectangle. And so this is an 18. And then this is a 2. So 18 by 2. So this little front rectangle on the first floor is 36 square feet. I'm just going to write it off to the side, and I'll call it A. And then I've got my big rectangle, which is this 23. And then let's see if it gives me the whole number. 22 and 18 combined is what the first floor is. So 22 plus 18 is how long it is. That's 40 by 23. So let me just draw it so you can see what this looks like. What I'm doing is this rectangle right here. 23 from here to here, and then 40 the whole way across. So 40 times 23. And so now this rectangle is 920, and we'll call this B. So I got A, I got B, it's 920. And then the last one is this upper level. Now we found that upper level because we basically added 2 feet of overhang from our bottom measurements. And so that's where it was 18, but now it's 20. Because that 2 feet of overhang. And then there's 2 feet of overhang on the front as well. And so this was 25, but now it's 27. Everybody see how we just used the measurements from the first floor and added in the 2 feet of overhang that we literally, folks, we're just standing outside and we take our tape measure and we just stick it up in that corner of overhang and we just go 2 feet. And you can use the correlation of that in the first floor. And so this second floor, which is still living area, is 20 times 27. And so that is 540 square feet. And so let's call that C. So if this was your house with this weird kind of second story that's not a true 2-story, We just use the correlation of the lineups. You're going to add in your 540 square feet. And so the total square footage of this house, your 36 plus your 920 plus your 540 for a total of 1,496 square feet. Of course, this is all square feet, but I just didn't fill it in there. And it gets weird. I mean, it gets really weird. And I'm going to be honest with you. As long as I've done this, if I have a ranch style house, an L shape, a square shape, a rectangular shape, and I've got time, I'll go out and I'll measure it because I like to remind myself what it's like and keep fresh on it. But folks, there are some houses that no matter how long I've been practicing this, I just don't want to do them. I'll tell you a funny story. I listed a house a couple years ago, and I'm not making this up. And I measured it myself because it was like a distressed property. Needed a lot of work. And I didn't want to pay anybody because I wasn't even sure I could sell it. And when I got to the living room, and I'm not joking, I don't know who was smoking crack whenever they built this house, but they had an octagonal bay window. Folks, I want you to picture this. On the corner of the house, instead of it being a square edge like this, it was out, over, 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 over. I mean, it was like 17 different sides to this window, even more than octagonal. And so when I started measuring this house, I said, nope, we're not counting that. We're going to pretend that's straight because I'd rather undershoot it than overshoot it, right? And then get in trouble for oversight. I said, we're about to lose 30 square feet. I don't even care. All right, we're going to pretend this is 2,000 when it might be 2,030. I'm not counting it. I'm not measuring it because it was just too much. So, of course, there's some things that come into play and some difficulties. Let me see if I can find some other examples in here. Don't ever let you stress this out because here's the thing. The commission says that we as real estate professionals have to have a basic understanding, but they also go on to say that yes, you can hire somebody with a greater expertise than yourself, like an appraiser, to measure. But here's the thing you have to understand. If an appraiser gets it wrong, the commission doesn't have any authority to discipline an appraiser. Who do they have the authority to discipline? Us. And so we have to have at least enough expertise to look at what the appraiser did or whoever we hired to measure to say, is this accurate? Is it not? Did they mess up? Did they use the right standards? And I'll tell you what I did. I had a photographer that started doing measurements for me years ago. And I still use a photographer. But because he's not an appraiser, before I started letting him do my measurements, I hired him to do the measurements on my first listing that I used him for. And I also measured the property to see how close we were in numbers. And we were pretty close. I did it for a second property to see how close we were. Before I just started trusting his numbers, I measured and he measured, and I used it as a means to kind of, gauge his expertise. Now, there are plenty of licensed appraisers out there who will do just measurements for you at a very reasonable cost, just to verify square footage and things of that nature. So you can hire somebody. Don't let this be the bane of your existence, but it is something that we kind of have to understand. So if you look at this one right here, this is where we start getting into some weird stuff like Ashley was talking. Yeah, there we go. Some weird stuff, right? And so this is where sometimes you just got to sit there and you just got to mull it over for a little bit. So in this house, you've got dormers. Dormers create extra living space. I actually have a dormer in this bonus room that I'm currently teaching you from. And so it actually adds flat ceiling space. Even though I have sloped walls in this room, I don't have any slopes in the dormers because it creates exterior walls. And so you may have a situation where the house has a second floor, but you've got this pitch to it because of the fact that it was not built as a very much a square. And then you've also got these dormers. And so in this example, I'm trying to see what they have on this backside right here. They got a storage unit. So if you had, let's just kind of work through this property. You've got your garage. That's the same size. Then you got an out jutting. Yeah, then it comes back in. So you've got your garage here, and let me zoom out a little bit so we can see it all at the same time. In this property, you can't see it because it's kind of hidden behind a tree, but you got this front corner of the garage. Now, folks, always measure the garage too, because you want to have your box, and you need those measurements because there might be living space above it. And that's where you would have to know to kind of subtract it back out. And so you come across, and that's where you got these measurements here. And you would need to note where the garage actually ends. And then that way you can subtract out the garage later. And this, sometimes you just go back in there to measure that out. Then you got this little out jutting, and so we kind of measured it out here. And then you come across, and then it looks like it sinks back in. Now, that's what it looks like on this picture. So it comes across, sinks back in, and then has this other area over here. It's hard to tell exactly what's happening here, but you get the point that if there's depth, you got to come back out, and when it tucks back in, although it looks like maybe this is all the same, and then this is the out jutting. Either way, when you get done with the first floor, that's where you're going to come back and you're going to take out the negative space off the first floor. But if you've got, for say, living area, you see how this is kind of living area in the back corner? If you've got living area over that storage unit, you wouldn't subtract it on the second floor. You would only subtract it at the end. Same thing with the garage. If you've got living area over the garage, you need to account for those measurements when you find the first floor, duplicate it for the second floor, and then pull it back out. Now, this one is very, very unique. And so this is sometimes where I said, after you get the first floor measurements, it may be more practical to measure from the inside. So this whole second floor is just a big bonus room. It may be more practical to just kind of come in and measure from here to here, measure from here to here, measure from here to here. Because then you can account for this area. And if you've got exterior walls, you'd add 6 inches. But if they're not exterior, meaning there's dead attic space, you don't add anything. And then you could account for this big rectangle. And if there's exterior walls, then you could add 6 inches and 6 inches. And then you could measure the dormers individually. And that's where sometimes it is actually more practical to measure from the inside on the second floor, especially if you don't live in a true 2-story house. But there are a lot more corners and stuff, and I'll tell you why you don't measure from the inside, folks. I want you to think about this. If you look at this first floor right here, I'm not giving you any of the actual layout, but we all know there's kitchens, there's living rooms, there's bedrooms, there's all these different things. If you were to come in and let's say, here's your kitchen, and then you've got a foyer, and then you got stairs, and then you got a hallway, and then you got bedroom, then you got bedroom. If you were to try to measure from corner to corner, you're going to hit a wall, and then you're going to have to go on the other side of that wall, and then you're going to have to go on the other side of that wall. Well, folks, every single wall in your house is at least 4 inches. And so if you don't account for that, then you're never going to have the right numbers. Because these are based on exterior measurements, it's not practical to measure from the inside. There is sometimes where builders do really weird things and you get dead space because they're like, oops, we accidentally put a frame here where we shouldn't have. And you've got like this whole little area that's not even exposed, even though it should be. So I'll tell you one other thing to be aware of, and then I'll let you continue to ask questions and we'll give you more examples because we've got time. If you live in an apartment or a condo, you can still do this assignment, but word of caution. In apartments and condos, we don't count outside space. It is walls in. And so here's the hard part about measuring an apartment or a condo. Folks, you're literally having to account for every single room because you got a bedroom here. And so you have to go and get the dimensions of this bedroom from here to here. And then you come out and then there's a hallway. Okay, now you got to get the dimensions of this hallway from here to here. If you got a closet at the end, well, closets count as living space because there's floor in there. So you got to get the dimensions of this closet from here to here. You got another bedroom over here. So you got to get the dimensions of this bed from here to here. And of course, if there's closets inside this one and then closets inside the next one, you got to get the dimensions of those closets. Do you see how much of a pain in the butt this can be? Because you're literally having to do measurement after measurement, and you have to draw these things because people have a tendency to forget their hallways. They have a tendency to forget their bathrooms. They have a tendency to forget their pantries. Folks, it's got floor. It's living space. And so take your time. But if you live in an apartment or a condo, draw the picture, give me the layout, measure from wall to wall. Now, that's where your life is real easy, though, because you can use a laser measure, and you do not need to add 6 inches. You can literally go into each room that's square and just go bam, bam, and you got your measurements. And then you're just doing basically the same little calculations over and over again. How many square feet is this room? How many square feet is the closet? How many square feet is this room? How many square feet is the hallway? Then you got your living room over here. Where does your living room end? Where does your kitchen begin? Find the measurements. So you can still do this. And like I said, folks, if you were sitting here thinking about your house and it makes you want to vomit, it doesn't have to be your house. Go to your friend's house who lives in a ranch. Measure their house. If you live in a townhouse, let's talk about that for a second. If you live in a townhouse, it's a little more difficult. And I'll tell you why. Most townhouses will stagger, meaning there'll be one that sticks out, one that comes back in. And so in a row of townhouses, there's one that's out, there's one that's in. If you are a center unit, actually, let me move this picture over here. Let's see if I can just move my drawing. I didn't move all of it. It's okay. If you are living in a townhouse community and you are not an in unit, maybe you're an interior unit, and you've got, this one being yours, well, here's the easiest thing to do, because it's still inside, right? It's your house. While you may not have necessarily exterior walls, if you're an inside unit, the easiest thing is still going to be, if you come out here and you can do it without weirding out your neighbors, if you measure the depth of their unit, let's say it's 30 feet, and then you realize yours is shorter, measure from here to here, let's say that's 3 feet. Well, the depth of yours is now 27 feet. Makes your life so much easier. It's just using spatial reasoning to figure out certain things, because a townhouse is going to have layers and stuff. Even measuring inside a townhouse is a pain in the butt. So you can use your neighbor's unit to figure out the depth, and then you can just measure the backside and measure your width. Now, because you don't have exterior walls, you don't need to account for 6 inches. You own 3 inches into your walls, but don't stress about that. Folks, is 6 inches plus or minus on any given measurement going to change the entire square footage of the house? No. So if you're confused about to add 6 inches or don't add 6 inches, don't stress about it as long as it's not happening on every single wall. 6 inches is not going to be a make or break. And so townhouses are kind of a pain in the butt in that regard too, but you can always use the correlation of your neighbor's house to your house to make sure that you're kind of comfortable with it. And at the end of the day, folks, have fun with it. Don't stress about this. I know this stuff is gross, okay? It is heavily discussed. When I teach it, there's every single real estate agent. Sometimes I'll ask the question, and I said, okay, well, how many of you like measuring? Nobody likes measuring. Nobody. Okay? What else can I answer for you about this? And I'll tell you this too, download this residential square footage guidelines because it does answer a lot of questions. If you have bay windows, it talks about bay windows. If you have dormers, it talks about dormers. If you're a split level, it talks about a split level. Now, with a class this size, if you find over the next week where you're doing this activity and you say, well, Seth, can you help me out with this? Sure. Text me, email me, but make sure you send me a picture, because here's what never fails, okay? I love all my students to death, but some students will reach out to me. Well, Seth, I have this room, and it's like you go up like a set of stairs, but then there's like this landing, but then there's like the storage above this other piece, and then it connects to this other thing. Folks, there is about 10 billion different styles of home. I will never know what you're talking about. Send me a picture, okay? If you want my kind of guidance, if you want my suggestion, happy to do it, but send me a picture, because I'm never going to know what you're talking about. And you're like, well, it's kind of, it pitches like this, but then it's just for storage, and then it's kind of finished, but it's kind of not. I don't know what you're talking about. There's too many architectural styles. Everybody with me? So it talks about breezeways, chimneys, closets, dormers, and like I said, don't ever let this stress you out. I need something. I need it to be pretty. I need it to make sense. Am I going to verify it for accuracy? No. This is your opportunity to get your exposure to measuring a house in a safe and controlled environment. I'm not the commission. But I do want you to turn in something to me that looks like something you'd be okay with the commission looking at. I'm not going to verify your numbers, though. So I ask this. If you don't use graph paper, use a ruler. Do not turn in something like what I'm drawing on the screen with a mouse, okay? If it's janky like this, we got an issue, okay? I need straight lines. So if you're not using, and like I said, if you don't have a printer, you can print out graph paper if you have a printer. If you don't have a printer, you can use notebook paper, you can use blank paper, but use a ruler, folks. And so I need, straight lines. And so I can see kind of the breakdown of like the different pieces you're looking at, your outjuttings, your different things, your measurements, how you divided them up. What I like to do when I break them up for measurements, on my paper, I will do my measurement lines as dotted lines, so I know. Let me pick a different color so I can show you. What I'll do is I'll say, okay, I had this outjutting, but I'm going to measure this all together because that was the way it worked for mine. And then what that means is this is another rectangle over here, and I'm going to measure that one, and then I'm going to measure this one as a rectangle over here. And so you see it can show me how I'm breaking up my measurements, because it doesn't, when you do it, folks, it's not going to look nearly as pretty. I know it's kind of hard to see with that color. And so maybe this has an outjutting on the top, and so I'm going to do the first floor here. And then the second floor, you know, I've got this whole area. And then the front, you know, you just break it into smaller, more bite-sized pieces. Now, let me remind you one more thing. If you've got the triangles, okay, let me just remind you of that one more time. Don't let it stress you out. So in this picture that I just did, and let's just clear it out. Let me do it a little bit prettier. If you had something like this, maybe another outjutting here, and then a, you know, kind of concave place. But then you had a bay window. I'm going to try to draw this here. Don't let them freak you out. And so if you had a bay window, that's a very large bay window to scale, but you would be able to measure from the inside, where does your bay window start? Where does your bay window end? And so that gives us the base piece of it. So let's say that this is a 10-foot bay window. Well, from the outside, you could arguably measure this piece, right? And so then you could say, okay, well, this is 6 feet. And then from the inside, yet again, you see where that bay window exists. Stand right here, extend a tape measure from here to the furthest out point. Now, it was kind of janky and angled, but you see what I'm saying here. And so that's 4 feet. Now you have everything you need, because that's also 4 feet. And so rectangle, let me do my dotted line thing. Let's do red. Red doesn't work. Let's do a different color, maybe blue. There you go. I'm going to do this rectangle, which is a 6x4, right? 6x4. And then my triangles, because this is 10 total and that's 6, that tells me that I got to split the difference. 2 and 2. So 2 times 4 is 8. And remember, a rectangle is base, or is length times the width. So a triangle is 1/2 base times height. So if it's 2 times 4, and then you divide it by 2, and so each one of these is 4 square feet. And so that's how you would add in that bay window. Okay, you got your rectangle, you got your triangle, you got your triangle. Now listen, if you end up with an octagonal bay window like I did in that one I got, take the L, folks. Okay, pretend that bay window doesn't exist. All right, that 20 square feet is not going to make a difference in the sale. Just take the loss on it, because nobody needs that kind of negativity in their life either. You with me? How are we feeling? Feeling a little better? Good deal.